I agree.
Yeah. So, hey, what's up? So, yeah, we were just talking about right when I hit record. We both host podcasts. Um, but what were you just saying?
Now, I've been on a lot of episodes in my life, but I was never the guest. I was always the host. So I was like, okay, I think it's time like to reverse roles a little bit, see like how it feels to be on the other side,
Yeah.
and see how it is also to have. I'm probably going to be. I'll ask you after the end of the like how annoying of a guest I am because I might be acting like as a host sometimes.
Well, this is what's going to happen though. When you get to podcast hosts in a podcast, right? It can be very interesting. I've seen it work both ways where like the conversation gets really interesting because you're both really good at asking questions, but then it also, I've seen it go the other way where nobody asks questions because you're waiting the other
Yeah.
person to ask questions. I'll, uh, I'll, uh, I'll kick it off. So I guess, what was a podcast? Who are you and what was a podcast that you used to do?
Okay, so I'm Kostas. I can give a brief, or we'll see how brief is going to be, like background of me. So I'm currently co-founder of a company called Typedef.
Nice.
We are in the space of data infrastructure. Actually, that's what I've been doing like pretty much like my whole career, to be honest. Obviously, also it's been like has like a little bit at least of a AI flavor as everything else today. We can talk more about that like later. Before that, I was like at Starburst Data, working there with the founding team of like Trino, the creators of Trino.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience with Martin, Dane, and David. My role was like interesting because I was in product, but I was mainly working with the open source, which is sounding like a little bit counterintuitive, probably. But Trino was like a very core part of the product that Starburst had, obviously,
Oh, yeah.
and all the core features were coming from the open source. So my role was like to coordinate with everyone there and figure out how to productize and take these new features like in to market. Before that, at the Rudderstack, I was there part of like the leadership team. Joined very early, at the pre-seed stage actually. Stayed until we raised our Series B. That's where I also started the podcast. My career in being like a podcast host. We started the show called the Data Stack Show. And before that, I started another company in 2014, Blendo. That was when I was still back in Greece. Blender was a cloud DLT solution similar to Fivetran, its data, and started around like the same time with these guys. This is also like an interesting story of like how it felt like to be in the first wave of like a category creation of stuff in this space. Kept growing the company until 2019. And then actually what happened, we merged the company with Rudderstack. That's how I joined the company and moved here in the Bay Area since then. So yeah, that's like a not that brief, but I
Yeah.
think detailed
That's fun.
enough background of me.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, and I was on your podcast at least once. Maybe I was on more. I can't remember.
Maybe. I mean, it's been a while also, like since I stopped like being a part of the team there, but we definitely had like an episode where I was also there, I think.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So good. Yeah, good podcast. Yeah, where to begin? I guess, kind of, I guess fast forwarding to today, like what are you excited about?
What I'm excited about. Um, for me, I mean, I started Typedef at a time that like AI was like kind of just starting. So I was already seeing that okay, there are some changes that need to happen. Let's say like in data infrastructure in general.
Hmm.
There, the whole industry like has changed a lot. Like since the current tooling has been like created, like many new use cases, like new workloads, even like new types of engineers. Like yeah, 10 years ago, like the what's called the analytics engineer was not even a term, right? Like nobody knew about that thing. Um, and I was like, okay, let's see where the pains are, like what we should be working on. So we started like working on something, and then like AI kind of like happened and turned into like
Mm-hmm.
this catalyst. I wouldn't say that it brought something new, in my opinion, but I think it's really accelerated things that were kind of like already happening. Like there was already, let's say, this shift from the tech industry delivering value through like automation and software to
Yeah.
figuring out like a way to deliver value through like the data that we have, like what we can do with this data, right? And what I really like right now, to be honest, is that like all this whole stuff like with AI and LLMs is like so early that I feel young again. I
Nice.
think it reminds me of like, okay, I'm old enough to be, have experienced like the rise of the internet back when
Mm-hmm.
like, like connecting to the internet was not reliable at all as it is today, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could download something, it would be corrupted. A lot of things like they were missing there, like building software or like serving software or using software. It took like a good 20 years like to get where we are today. And I think kind of like with AI right now, we're kind of like at this stage where, like there is a lot of noise together with signal of like what can happen there, like a lot of potential. But there's a lot that needs to be figured out, like a lot of the basics that need like to be built, right? They are not there. So yeah, it reminds me of like these old good days where, there's a lot to be solved, a lot of frustration because things don't work like the way they expect them to work. But
Right.
I think there is beauty also like trying to make things work. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I definitely reflect back on the internet times as well. Um, it was definitely a fun time. Like I think I got my first internet connection in '92, I believe. So that was
mhm.
predates the web, and I remember it was a lot of bulletin board services and
Yeah,
yeah, the Usenet and the Well and all this fun stuff back in the day. And there was a time of, I mean, it was definitely a time of euphoria, right? Like I actually have old issues of Wired magazine and some other cyberpunk ones where they're talking about the
yeah,
global village that was going to happen and all this. It was going to flatten the world, and everyone would be have access to all this knowledge and so forth. And I feel like that same level of excitement because I think it's still very new, right? There's this level of exuberance. What's different to me, and I'd love your take on this, is um, now it's back. The internet was very decentralized back in the day. I think there was a moment in time when it could have been something different, where it could have been this, I think the theme of decentralization, this real global village actually could have taken place. But then the big companies got involved, and then,
yeah.
big companies like AOL spun from it, and then it was kind of like whatever. Just the massive corporations the internet was supposed to do away with actually just took it over. And so AI right now feels like it has the same level of exuberance, but it's also the incumbents or the big companies or well-funded companies making these models. And if you go to the major data conferences or tech conferences, it feels like the narrative is almost being pushed down people's throat. Like this year is all about agents. Like you have to do agents. This is a year of
Yeah.
agents, or we're going to beat the shit out of you if you don't believe us. Like it feels like it's that level of narrative pushing, whereas so it doesn't feel as organic in some sense. Like I think to me, it feels like we're all chasing, not all of us, but like it feels like the industry is chasing whatever the big players are telling them where to go. And so
Hmm.
I actually don't see a lot of true innovation in this space as I did in the internet. I think everyone seems to be kind of following the same
Hmm.
kind of you know string on cheese on the string through the maze kind of thing. But love your thoughts
Hmm.
on this because I can be a bit cynical. So,
No, no, no. I think, I mean, it's definitely like a different world, right? I think the exposure to technology, like to people back, like with internet, like compared like to how it is now, is like completely different, right? Like, think about like, okay, AI came out like with these chat applications, and you have people that I don't know, like the equivalent of like this group of people like 20 years ago probably touched the internet like 5-7 years after the internet like was accessible to people. But now we kind of started from that. It's like almost like starts from the consumers, right? Like the hobbyists out there, which I think like it's part of like what is adding like a lot of like the noise out there. Obviously, there is also how to say that. I mean, we're at the stage right now. We think about it, and I'm sure like everyone who's like in the industry like sees what's going on out there. There is like a lot of hype, right? Like everyone is talking about like AGI and like I don't know, like every model is going to cure cancer in the next like couple of weeks or something, right? I'm sure like Elon believes that like after Grok 4 came out or whatever, but uh, but at the end of the day, like the actual, let's say, like value created that is measurable, it's still not there.
That's exactly it. It might get there.
Yeah,
Who knows? Yeah.
yeah. I think it's the same like with the internet back then, right? It's like I don't think that everyone like when the internet was like starting and connecting on their local BBSs and stuff, like they were thinking about okay, like how we're going to monetize this like in an exponential way, like so like in a year from now we will like, be like on $100 million like ARR, and in another year like 300. I'm like, okay, it's innovation takes time, and it's
Yep.
not trivial like to figure out what is going to work and what not, and what problems need to be solved. But at the same time, you had like this kind of craziness where, especially like in the enterprise, all the executives were like sold into that and start like putting like a lot of money and a lot of mandates of like making this happen. So there's like a lot of pressure for this like to happen right now. It
Mm-hmm.
has to happen. We have placed our bets, and if we lose, like it's not going to be fun.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I think like a lot has to do with that. But there are, in my opinion, like from what I see, at least like by wandering around like in the open source out there, um, you still have like these groups of people that they are trying to be like creators, like come up with
Yeah.
things, like work more in a local way. And I think there is an opportunity for kind of like breaking the centralization that the internet got into, like with primarily with SaaS, I would say, uh, because especially like as I think like hardware progresses and it will be like easier for people like to host models like locally. I think we will see more of like the data moving like locally to
Yeah.
where like models are, and have like more, let's say, like decentralized applications
Yeah.
around like AI. We're not there yet, obviously, but I do find it interesting. Like it's I think I'm judging by myself primarily and how my
Right.
behavior has changed in like how I consume information. Uh, but it is in a way more local. The model is not local yet, right? But the experience is like much more local. Like I'm not spending that much time like on the browser as I used to, right? And the
Right.
browser, like if we think about it, it's almost like a monopoly. And the information as a whole, like the basic stuff that we do around like finding information, it's pretty much like a monopoly, at least like in the Western world, like through like Google, right? But I'm not doing that much. Maybe not at all. But again, I might be a little bit of like the more on the exception, just because of like
Yeah.
being in the space where I am and doing the things that I'm doing. But um, I can see like more people, doing more in a local environment. And honestly, like, let me give you an example. Okay, so that's an example that I like. It's a personal thing. I have like a problem like my whole life of like buying clothes online because I can't conceptualize sizes at all. Like I'm blind with that stuff. Okay. Uh, so at some point I was like, okay, I would like to get a T-shirt. Uh, I hate like searching for that stuff like on Google because I get spammed with stuff that like it's like over
Yeah.
stimulating. Like I can't too much information that's irrelevant. So what I did was like, hey, like I opened like ChatGPT. I was like, hey, I want to buy a t-shirt. Like I saw this one. I kind of feel like it looks like around my size. There are like some other candidates, but I can't really understand like the difference because like it's also like in inches. I grew up with a different metric system, and like I still have a problem with that.
Right.
So this silly thing like went out there, like fed the information and created like a really nice comparison, like on a table with things next to each other, and made some suggestions exactly for the brand and the things that I was asking. Right now,
Interesting. I mean,
to be
while
honest,
you're talking, I'm actually gonna type. I've never tried shopping for clothes on ChatGPT.
yeah,
How do you prompt
yeah.
it?
Uh, I can find it, but I was like, I think I started the session with, I have this t-shirt that I'm looking into, and that t-shirt that I'm looking into, and I'm trying to understand like what is going to be feeling better like as a fit on me, and I used the third one t-shirt that I already have, that I know that I like the fit, but I don't know the dimensions, that I gave it to it, and I was like, that's kind of the fit that I like, right? So I didn't give any numbers and stuff. Like I just gave the brand, the size of the t-shirt that I'm already wearing, and asked like to compare it to the other two. And we had like I don't know, I probably spent like 5 minutes like on this thing. I don't think like I did more than that. And I bought the t-shirt, by the way, and it was good.
Interesting.
But the most important thing, to be honest, it wasn't. It's that I might not like to personalize the experience of buying something and make it like to fit to me, and not like trying to make myself fit in like the average thing that Google or like wherever Shopify has figured out that maximizes, let's say, like the likelihood of someone like buying something. Uh, and where I want to go get to is that I don't see why this particular experience cannot happen with like a smaller model. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that you need to have all three out there, or like a crazy, sophisticated math Olympiad kind of like model to tell you, hey, like, okay, it's how like they look with each other. Like that's like the table with like the differences, and like in my opinion, probably this is going to fit like a little bit better. And I have to say something important. It also told me that some of them might shrink during the
Mm.
first wash, so I should consider that too, right? Uh, and these are like the kind of experiences that, like in my opinion, I don't see why they cannot happen local. Like they should be able like to happen local.
One second here. That's interesting. So you got me onto a tangent here. So I'm actually looking at. So I've been really into Japanese like retro T-shirts, but
Okay.
preferably printed on some sort of wash, like almost denim
Yeah.
feel to it, kind of faded and whatnot. But it's interesting because I know traveling around and getting T-shirts either as swag or buying T-shirts in different countries size large, for example, which I am, they fit very differently.
Yeah.
Asia size large is I need probably XXL
Yeah.
in Thailand, for example, because they're just smaller there. That's how it is. So
Yeah. Yeah.
size large in the U.S., that's almost a vanity size in some ways,
Yeah.
because everyone here is very massive. So it is interesting. So I have to ask it, like in which country does this come from?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to play a role, and especially with shrinking, right? Because cotton, I notice in Southeast Asia, if you buy T-shirts there, they're going to shrink probably about a
Yeah.
half or full size.
Mm-hmm.
So just it's how it is. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, local would be good because I have to ask ChatGPT, and now it puts that into memory as well. So now every conversation I have is like, when I chat with ChatGPT, for example, which I do for just everyday stuff, it's like, you're obviously very cool, and smart, and now you're a great dresser too. And I'm like, no, okay, great. This is gonna be part of the conversation going forward for every single chat we have.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, I think like I don't know, I might, and if I keep something about like the agents kind of approach, I think the important thing is more about like the specialization.
yeah,
Yeah, like ideally, I would like to have like one model that I call it like my tailor or whatever, and like I just chat with it when I want like to buy t-shirts. It doesn't have to know that like okay, like I also write code in Rust or whatever. Like it's
right.
irrelevant, right? Um, and yeah, like it is true. Like you do when you use like these like generic, like really big like models or whatever, you don't have that much control like over like the context that they create and like they maintain for you, and it's going to end up being an average of yourself, right?
Mhm.
Because you're just doing everything, and I think there is value on the consumer side, like for people to have like specialized, like kind of like agents, like to just call them agent or whatever, like models, like to use for like specific like tasks. But for the enterprise too,
Yeah.
like I don't think that they're like tasks. But like LLMs are like really good. Like okay, let's say do like classification or doing like some filtering or extracting like information. You don't necessarily need the biggest, latest,
Right.
most complicated thing to do that. Actually, it's probably going to slow down what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what I keep about like the agents. For me, it's more of an architecture kind of
Hmm.
approach than anything else. So yeah,
Super
if you
cool.
keep if you keep like looking into t-shirts, let me know. I'd love to hear how's your experience with
Yeah.
buying stuff
I
using
mean, you,
AI?
you got me onto a tangent now, so I'm gonna definitely try it out. But so what? Out of curiosity, like when you run local models, what are you what's your flavor right now? What do you like?
Uh, Honestly, I don't have that much experience on local stuff. My biggest, like what I primarily use locally, it's probably Whisper.
Oh, interesting.
I use it a lot, like to do. I'm a person like I can't I can't have like the attention to go through like a whole presentation.
Yeah.
So what I usually do, like even with conferences, I go there like most of the time, like I try to connect with people, and then I'll probably download like from YouTube the presentations, get the transcripts from there, and then do like a summarization first, see like the things that I'm interested in, and then I'll dive into like the things that I want. So I've been using like Whisper a lot, and I'm
Interesting.
using it like locally uh, because it's easy, like it's convenient.
I don't think I've even used that.
Uh, Other models, I mean, I've used um, like some variations of like Llama,
Yeah.
but I'm not a hardcore like local model user. I'm looking more into like getting into that stuff. It's one of the things that I
Yeah.
want, like with the open source project that we released like a couple of weeks ago. Like then one of the big next steps is also like to add support for working like with local models. What I'm
Awesome.
more interested, to be honest, with that is like a project that I find very interesting and I want to get my hands on. It's like Unsloth. Uh, Primarily because like it it opens like the opportunity to, because like a lot around like fine tuning, to actually some of these tasks that we were talking about, to actually like build specialized smaller models or agents, whatever people want to call them today, for like these specific tasks that you want, which I think is like super important because my like where I come from, which is data processing at scale, if you want like to add inference in the equation right now, even like with a reasonable, I'm not saying like a really big workload, right? Like you don't have like to have like a lot of data. It's prohibitively expensive, not in dollar amount, but in time. So some of the models, like the light versions and all these things, like they have like better like performance, but then like you get stuck like with the throughput also because you need throughput too. So it's kind of like I think something that needs to be figured out. I don't think that like we can get, like these traditional like pipelines that we see like in data engineering, for example, right? And add on them like also inference, and they're going to work. I think it's going to be like needs something more there for this like to happen.
Well, the pipelines that we've been building up to now and whatnot, I mean, they weren't made for machine learning or AI. Typically, they're made for analytics.
Yeah.
So the data sets alone need to be changed. Like tabular data, tabular data is notoriously not great with large language models, but it's getting better. I think there's more people starting to look at it better, but or take different approaches. But that's still an area of a lot of research. So yeah, I think everything. It's kind of fun though, right? Like you mentioned the word excitement at the beginning. Like I'm excited because you get to rethink a lot of these architectures from the ground up because you kind of have to. These aren't. And it was something I was talking about, earlier this week with Shane Murray, who's over at Monte Carlo now, but he was the head of data over at New York Times for a long time. And even, we're kind of talking about like the, sort of this world that we've been in, and sort of this world we get to invent now, which is, I don't think you get a chance that often, really, to invent entirely new architectures. But I feel like, as I walk around conferences, the troubles that I have, or I say the cognitive dissonance I have really is just when I look around, it feels like we're trying to shoehorn in the way we've been doing things into the AI world instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, so if we were to do this, if we were to start over again, like what would this actually look like? Like that's a conversation I don't hear enough about. I'd love your take on that.
Oh, 100%. It's like I'm really happy that you are saying that because like I'm asking that because I think it is like a conversation that needs to start. We're trying like, okay, it's kind of like the opportunity that I was lucky enough like to get with what we are building right now because the timing was right to be like, oh, why not like rethink everything like from first principles like, and actually I think we have to, and it's an easy thing like to explain. So compute like with data like this past like 15 years, right, was pretty much like all the workloads, they were like CPU bound, right? Like we were always constrained by like how much the CPU like can crunch, right? So all the systems that you see out there, like from like even like DuckDB, like Snowflake, Databricks, right? Trino, they are all built with the core assumption that whatever we do, we need like to optimize everything around like our CPUs.
Yeah.
In some cases, okay, like I.O. was like getting into like when you have like your shuffles and like these things, but at the end of the day, it wasn't like the primary thing that like the query engine was like optimizing for, right? Today, like what happened like when LLMs came in is that these workloads changed completely from being CPU bound to actually being I/O bound. Now, you have to send your tokens like to this thing over there, and you have to wait. And you have to send it like over the wire. Like it's not like in your local cache. You are not optimizing for like cache misses, like and NUMA proximity and like all these things that like people would read if they go and read like the papers like from the journal like in Munich, for example, like on high performance like databases. So yeah, sure. Like let's take Spark, right? We can scale it like infinitely, like in practice, I would say, not even in theory, by adding like more nodes there, right? You need to at least have one node like for your coordinator and like one node for your worker. Like you need to have like at least one worker. And you will start like making requests like to LLMs, right? Now, these two nodes that you have there, like their CPUs, they would like mostly like idle at the end of the day, like waiting for the inference like to happen. So no matter what you do, like to try and take this system and extend it to do that kind of, let's say, like inference with like a UDF, or even if it's not a UDF, let's say it's like the function, like a column function that they've added there. At the end of the day, like the whole system needs to be completely rebalanced in order like to be efficient when the dominant cost that the optimizer needs to account for is now like IO and it's not like CPU. Can they do it? Probably. I don't know. I mean, I think it's really difficult. Like these systems have been built. They are very complex systems. They are very like millions of like man hours put like to build what they are today, right? And it is existential for them too. Like if these things gets realized and like now suddenly like people want these new workloads that they are not necessarily, you know, like the trillions of rows that you get, like let's say from, I don't know, like logs from your servers or like whatever. But there are probably trillions of tokens, which is a different thing. They will be relevant, right? Like there will be someone else who might take over, right? So I think they are relying on the distribution that they have and the like the dominance in the industry right now, especially in the enterprise, to actually keep the attention to them until it's figured out. I think a lot of that stuff like probably will be like figured out through acquisitions, not necessarily like internally. I think culturally for a product and engineering org, like to be able to shift so drastically and like start working like from scratch and some things is like probably like impossible for like such a big organization. But yeah, like I totally agree with you, and I think that's like the most exciting like opportunity right now. Like I think like people should be, and you know what? The beauty of the thing is that there are the tools out there for people to go today and build query engines if they want, without having to spend like 5 or 10 years to get something out the door, right? There is like a mature ecosystem with Apache Arrow, like Data Fusion, DuckDB, like Polars, like all these systems out there. And most importantly, also like Apache Arrow, it's like really what is enabling all these things like to work together. But yeah, like building something can take months instead of like years, as it did like for Snowflake, right? Like Snowflake, they had like to wait like 2 years to see a select one return the right thing back.
Right. So you started a new startup. Like, what are you working on?
Yeah. So we just came out of stealth like 3 weeks ago with Typedef. Our goal was like when we started, we wanted to create like a new type of data infrastructure that was then like to be focusing more on like the batch workloads that data engineers work with, but solve a lot of like let's like democratize this infrastructure more, like compared to like what we had so far with EMR Spark and even like Databricks. So the goal was like, okay, how we can make this something that more people can develop against, reduce the operational pain. So think of it as like serverless, being able like to work locally, but like execute remotely, kind of like think of like a modal kind of experience. But instead of being like around like generic, let's say like codes that you can execute like with Python, being specifically like with data frame API, right? I would say like not that different than like probably what like Bowplan is also like building. Although Bowplan also like is focusing on some other stuff that uh, we were not like focusing ourselves. Um, so that was like the initial thing, and that was like actually coming from my experience and my co-founder's Johnny experience. He was like at Tecton before, seeing like the pain that people have to operationalize and run these systems like at scale. And by the way, we're talking about companies like big companies like here, right? Like we're talking about Fortune 100 type of companies. If you leave, let's say, the bubble of like the Bay Area, finding the talent like to build and run these systems like at scale, it's really hard.
Very hard.
So that's where we started from. In the process, and we can talk about that. I think there are always how to say that you always get influenced both like from the product feedback that you get, but also realizing like the timing. And I can talk more about that. Why it's hard like to be a company trying to do this today. So at that point, we started like looking on like how to make the platform, let's say, like more focused on like specific like workloads, and that's where like AI came in. And like, okay, we see people either do OLAP or they do AI, and then somehow like trying to duct tape things together. What if, as you said earlier, start from like first principles, and we want to add inference as a first-class citizen, like in an OLAP system, what this would look like, and how also like we can do that in a way that would be easy for people like to work with it without having to learn too many new things, right? And that's how like Typedef evolved, and Fennec, like the open source like library that we released. So pretty much like what we are building right now, it is like, again, like a serverless platform. I think like the serverless needs to come and stay as a business model, actually, not necessarily like only about like how it is easy for people to use. But we expose a data frame API. People can build pipelines. Again, like the goal is like we are always focusing on more like batch kind of like workloads. But now like inference is like a first-class citizen of that. The way that we expose inference is through what we call like semantic extensions of existing operators. So instead of having like a generic function called prompt model or whatever, where you put like an arbitrary model in there, we create like a taxonomy of tasks, and we have semantic joins, or we have semantic filtering, semantic extract, semantic maps. The good thing about that is that you constrained the user enough, so it makes it easier for them like to create code that's like more modular, because part of like what you're trying to do, you don't push everything around what you're trying to do into the prompt, right? So it's easier like to reason from the code of like what is trying to happen there. But at the same time, the system can also start optimizing around that stuff, because now it has like more context of, it's not just like a call to an LLM, it's like a call to LLM like to do a very specific thing. It's like a semantic predicate, for example, for a filtering, right? Or it is a join, or it is something that tries like to extract data or do like a classification. So by knowing this thing, like the optimizer now can be like much smarter, and can account also for these operations when it plans how to execute things. So this is like our approach, like to seize the opportunity that you said of like, okay, if we had, now we have the opportunity to rethink things like from first principles, what that means. And one more thing, type systems. You said something like at the beginning really important. You said that the data is like completely different, right? Like we are working with different types of data now. Like we are not just crunching numbers and summing and like averaging and like all that stuff. So the type systems need like to evolve and take this into account. So if you check like our system, you will see that we have a data type like for Markdown, for example, because
Oh,
Markdown is
interesting.
becoming a very important interface to your data, just like JSON became when SAS and APIs became a thing, and like suddenly like databases were
Yeah.
like, oh shit, now we need also like to put support like for this semi what stupid thing, and became a thing, right? Like now we take it for granted that JSON like should be there, or we have like support like for transcripts. So we try to um, think as unbiased, I would say, as possible. I mean, it's not easy, but creating like a system that would include like inference in a very transparent way, and people can focus on their creativity, like okay, like how we can do things with our data, and apply the same like principles from engineering that we could before, right? Being like build systems that they are like modular, systems that we can version, and systems that they can optimize when you are using a declarative language, considering also taking into account also that like inference is there.
Interesting. So it's sort of inference becomes a first class citizen then, sort of as. If I'm kind of thinking about this, I mean, an acronym came to mind, and I hate acronyms, but here we go. Like online, I guess inference or predictive processing, or something like that, versus OLAP or transactional. Yeah, do you feel like you're creating a new category with what you're trying to do?
Probably, I think like I have a tendency to get attracted on like new categories, but yeah, like you can think of that. To me, to be honest, I think I'm not trying to create the category. I'm trying to accelerate getting there because I think it's kind of inevitable like to happen.
Yeah,
I don't see why people should care if one operation is, let's say, running like on a columnar fashion, like on an OLAP system, and the other operation is, let's say, inference that does like auto-completion. Like, why they should care about that?
yeah,
Kind of like, I mean, I don't know, like, like we had MapReduce, right? Like Hadoop with MapReduce. Like you could do what like Spark does. Like why did we need like Spark? Well, we needed Spark because we needed the right abstractions for people like to, more people actually, faster to go and build. Uh, and build systems that are more reliable because of like these abstractions there. I think we need the same thing also like with inference. Inference cannot, it's not anymore, let's say, a niche thing that just data scientists and ML engineers
hmm
have to care about. And the beauty of it is that the way that LLMs work, they are accessible to many more people than like before, right? Compared like to building predictive models like as we did in the past.
yeah. And it's not to say those predictive models still don't exist, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I think if you were to look at, okay, I mean, the quick litmus test is how many people have ChatGPT versus BigQuery, for example. Right.
How many? Sorry, say again.
So how many people are using ChatGPT versus BigQuery?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, or I guess Excel
But
versus ChatGPT would be that's a bit different, but anyway, uh,
yeah, a little bit different. But I think
yeah,
also, I think the kind of like the magic with these models is that let's take first of all, I don't think that the traditional ML models are going away. Like we still need them, right? It goes back to okay, why have like this huge generic good enough thing, or like having like specialized models that they are doing things like I don't think we will ever see fraud detection happening on ChatGPT. Like it's impossible. Like just because like the latency requirements like to do these things is like at the point where like these models like cannot do it, or they are not auditable enough like to be able and uh, adapt whenever like something new comes up as a way like to do fraud, right? But what changes is that fraud detection becomes actually more accessible to people because the feature engineering that you needed to do now, it's not like a black art. It's like you can actually use these models to guide and iterate much faster in doing like the feature engineering that you need. And you don't need to have like these very specialized skills and experience like to do it. I mean, of course you need to be like a data scientist, right? But you don't have to be the data scientist. Like it's only like a small group of people that they did it like for Uber and for Bank of America, and like nobody else knows like how to get into that. So there is like a democratization in a way of like working and building products on top of data, which doesn't mean that like everything is getting replaced. I think it's just like if we are smart, like we can get more people to get into these industries and like build more. Similarly to going back to the first days of the internet, right? Like think about like how many web developers we have like beginning of 2000 and how many web developers we have like in 2015. For this to happen, like the web was still the web, but we needed like the right tooling to make these things like much more accessible to more people, to get into the industry and build faster.
Yeah, the tooling space in the internet was interesting, right? Because you had, I think it's a combination of tooling and practices, but it depends what you're building. For apps, it definitely required teams of developers, and then but then you had WordPress as well, right? That's what anywhere from 40 to 60% of the internet still runs on WordPress, apparently. So it's like,
yeah.
But that's sort of the every person's tool, for better or for worse. But also goes to show too, like you could have great tooling, but you still got to produce things that people want to use or consume at the end of the day.
100%.
I can't even tell you how many sites are out there on the internet. I really don't know, actually, that run on WordPress that probably nobody reads, nobody maintains, and just so. I was actually just podcasting about this just recently, where I was talking about just how I'm like really bored with the concept of we're going to be able to create more apps with AI. And I'm like, more apps isn't what the world needs, I don't think. It's like apps that add value and do stuff that people want and care about is, I think, what we need to focus on. So I'm starting to see people use these metrics like, I'm so much more productive with because I can ship more quickly. And I'm like, that tells me nothing about what you ship. It just tells me that you're just cranking out code, but that's not in itself a metric that is meaningful to anybody, actually. Maybe to you, but to the rest of the world. So I think that's the one thing I would think about with the AI tools. I hope that we can also figure out is, and maybe with because we have context with LLMs, maybe it can focus on things that actually add more value, like the T-shirt example, right? Where like you know what you want. Because my concern is we're going to make all these apps. I'm like, who cares at the end of the day? Like honestly, we don't need more apps. Like,
I mean, for sure, I think like we have managed like to digitize every possible human process already. Like, so I don't think that. Sure, can we make like a better Salesforce? Yeah, of course. I mean, it's horrible. Like anyone who has used it like knows that. But I don't think like we needed any AI like to do that, right? I think the value of that we can get like from. We need to think like more again. I think like people are like, oh, we have like this new thing. It sounds important. Let's use it like to do the same things. And because it is new thing, the things will be new too. But like, no, like when you have like a new paradigm out there, you need to find new things. Like it's not done.
A good example. Remember in the early days of the internet, you could actually buy phone books of web pages. Right, and it was like we tried applying this whole notion of the world. Like, here you literally order a phone book because there's that many web pages. There weren't that many websites. Like, here's your directory. Like we tried to put that old Yellow Pages model onto the world of the web, and it was a fundamentally different landscape, right? So it took understanding that from first principles. Like, what could this enable? Well, it's about connections and nodes and all this stuff, right? That's where social media was brilliant in this regard, where it literally applies almost the same sort of a graph as hypertext or semantic web did to people relationships like that. That's something you couldn't do with a phone book.
Yep.
right? And I guess right now it feels like we're it's like, again, as I walk around conferences, we're still in the phone book world, like the yellow and white pages, and like what does the next one look like?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, and it's cool you're thinking about this. I think you sound like you're quite a bit ahead of where people are, at least in terms of what you're trying to do. Markdown, for example, as a data type, I didn't even think. I was like, cool, that actually makes a ton of sense because LLMs need that. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It is like, I think there is a, I think there is value in, like being, okay, switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
When it comes like to building like new things, um, there is definitely one of the things that I've learned, and you said, remember you said like the promise of internet was like everything will get flat and like everyone will get access to the same things and like the information. And back in 2014, when I started like my first company, I thought I was like, because I grew up with that. Like I also like got my first modem like in 1993.
Yeah.
Greece didn't have internet access yet. It was only like local BBSs that we were
Oh,
like
fun.
connecting. The first time that I connected on the internet, the whole country had just one IP for the whole country.
Whoa.
uh, and I grew up like in this environment where I was like, yeah, the things that you would read like in Wired and Usenet and like all this like cyber whatever like culture, that everything is like now local and opportunity is also local. So
Yeah.
yeah, why not like try to build like a business that can compete with the companies in Silicon Valley, but being like in Greece, right?
Yeah.
And I realized that it doesn't work exactly like that. Like opportunity is still quite local. You might have access to more information, but opportunity is like still very localized. And that's like also, I think, like probably, I mean, like a cultural and political and like human thing too, right? Like at the end of the day, like even like today, if you want like to sell to China, you will have to go there. Like it's there's no other way like to do it, right? So I've learned my lesson there that like you have to be like in the right place and the right time also like for things.
Oh, yeah.
But there is also like value to spend enough time to see the cycles happening, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like the reason I thought about like the markdown was because I was there when like MongoDB came out with this JSON thing like in the database where they were literally getting mocked for that, right? Like the
They did.
database people were like, what the fuck is this? Like you can cut it if it's not allowed like
Oh,
to
it's
say
fine.
these
Go
things,
for it.
but like, well, people were like, no schema, like schema, well, that's not like, it's like, doesn't compute like in the world of like relations, right? Uh, and I was like, okay, you see that the database at the end of the day needs to represent your world, right? That you operate in. Like if, let's say, the application layer is working with JSON, yeah, like, okay, at some point it will, the reality will force you to support this data type, right? Because otherwise it will be like so painful, like to build and maintain. And seeing that happening, or seeing like another great example of that is like, and I don't know how many people have thought about it. So when Snowflake started getting traction, one of the great things that it had was working with JSON.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this amazing new data type called variant, right? What this data type allowed was that your pipelines for ingestion now, they wouldn't break. Because if a schema was like, if you have a piece of data that was coming in, right, that wouldn't fit the schema, the pipeline wouldn't break. It would still like be able like to write, right? Now, of course, now you have schema on read semantics, which means you are just pushing the problem farther down, like your stack. But there is completely different requirements and things you have to compromise when you're on the transport layer, where like you have to write the data, and when you want like to start like processing the data like later on. And that was a big win for them, right? They came into like, of course, like the rest of the data warehouses also added support for that later. But it was like a great feature to have. And people might talk about many other things that made them like so special, but actually I do believe that this part was like super important for the early traction, especially because they were working with a lot of the growth was coming like from data that was being like collected from SaaS applications. So like naturally,
Right.
like Fivetran, for example, would like extract like JSON records, right? Like we were doing the same thing like with Blender. So you see these things like happening again and again and again, and it feels natural. Like okay, like if we're using Markdown, like not just for styling the text, because that's what Markdown is at the end of the day. But we are, as humans and being creative, we are using it to actually represent structure there. So it's not just like a header, like the header is also like a section. Uh, we shouldn't fight that. Like we should just adopt it because it's like inevitable that it will happen at some point. And that's what like I'm like part of like kind of like what I'm trying to do like with Typedef is apply these lessons in a way and bring these things and like see what new things we can do because we have now access like to these new data types and the data layer that represents our world like more accurately at the end of the day than like before.
That's super cool. It's a good insight too. I mean, if you look at with the even the text that an LLM will write back to you, for example, it's in Markdown. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It is a markdown, and I think I do, it is a way for the way that they are trained for them like to structure like the result in a way that the humans can understand, right? And the funny thing is that like okay, we have all these serializations of data that they are primarily like built for machines to be efficient.
right.
But now machines, in order to be efficient, we have to be more human in the way that we send data to them. It's kind of
Right.
funny, right? Like if you think about it. So yeah, sure, like you can send like a huge XML, but like the number of noisy tokens that you are going like to send there makes zero sense, right? Instead, if you turn that into like more loosely structured like markdown document, it will still have like the structure and the semantics of like what the different parts are here and why they are needed, without like all the noise of like the serialization itself that we needed before.
Right.
So it's kind of fascinating to see how we kind of managed to turn machines like in more like human-like in that respect, in terms of like interfacing with them.
Human like and also very alien like at the same time. It's it communicates with us, and I think in ways that it thinks, or at least like we've trained it to communicate with us. What an interesting thought experiment I've been asking people to do is actually ask AI the type of data that it would design for itself from the bottom up.
Uh-huh.
You
Uh-huh.
should do this if you haven't. It's fascinating what it comes up with.
Okay, I'll do that. No, I never thought
Yeah,
about that. That's
and ask it
definitely
also like
fascinating.
if you were to if AI was to make its own infrastructure to service itself, what would that be? And the answers it comes back with are jaw dropping. I'm not going to spoil the fun for you.
Okay.
You might get a different answer than I do too. But yeah, I was like, huh, that's kind of like what we have, and not at all anything like what we have right now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, yeah, I'll
yeah,
give it a
it's
try and
fun.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I'm just like, huh. And then I guess the question was like, well, who's to say it's probably not already building this stuff in the background? You don't even know it. I don't know. So, like
Hmm.
this kind of shadow AI just building its new data stack on its own.
Yeah,
It'll start a startup and start selling it, and you can buy it in Bitcoin, I guess. So,
yeah. I think I don't know. Like, we're still. I mean, I don't. It will be like a very. I think that's where like probably like the kind of like the singularity will happen. Like the moment that from a prompt we can end up with the Linux kernel.
right,
Uh, that probably, yeah, will signal that, okay, now we're fucked, like Terminator is coming. But I think
Who
we're too far
knows?
away from that.
I hope we're not that far. I mean, gosh, I was just listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. One of my friends was on it, Roman Plumsky, which I got an alert. I was like, Roman's on the show? What the hell? So he's like the max AI doomer of any doomers out there, I think. Like he's all about just like, we're all dead. But I don't know. And the thing is, you listen to him, and he's not wrong. Is the problem? There's nothing I listen to him say you're completely wrong on this. I mean, he's done a lot of research on this, but at the same time, I guess I try and remain a bit more hopeful or at least woefully naive about things. And but I'm having a lot of fun with AI right now. So
Yeah,
it's all good.
yeah, 100%. And I think like I don't know. I think if anything, what I find like kind of fascinating about like the tech industry and the professionals like in the tech industry, I'm not talking about like the businesses, is that it is an industry that by definition it works to disrupt itself. So they've learned like to change and adapt, and that's what's like happening like all these years. Like we had in the past like database administrators. Like, okay, we don't have database administrators anymore, but like it's not like
Right.
these people just died like homeless. They can repurpose like their skills and like their knowledge, right? And by nature, I think people, not all of them, but like I think like a good majority of the people, they are by their nature willing to learn new things and they get excited like in learning new things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we are doing like to see here too. I mean, yeah, sure, there are things. Can I go and build like a website with just like a prompt? Maybe, but this doesn't mean that the front-end engineer that was like building these things is like goes in like away from like one day to the other. And these people are learners. Like they can learn and like adapt like to the new things and discover the new things like in the
Oh
process
yeah.
too, because we are in the discovery. So that's not like I don't know, like for me like a very exciting time. Like
Mm-hmm.
building, like when like the cloud happened and we start creating a SaaS of everything, it got boring at some point. Like okay, it was like same thing again and again and again. Yeah, like okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Like if you were first, like you could make money, like blah blah blah. But like if you think of it like from a more like romantic, like tinkerer kind of like point of view, who likes like to learn and like discover new things and innovate. Yeah, okay, it was very incremental. Yeah, I was scaled a little bit more, but like okay, I mean sure. But now like we have the opportunity like to go do like completely different things. Like
Completely different.
yeah, like I I'm sure like I wish I could be like all the different types of engineers out there, just like to be able like in their own domain see how things apply. I was with one of like my colleagues here who's like more like on the DevOps SRE like infra. It was very fascinating like to see that the first thing that he thought about when Cloud Code came out was to use it to do like self-scripting and use it as part of like self scripts because you can
Interesting.
yeah, I would never think about that because I'm not messing with self scripts that much my day-to-day life, right? So it's type of engineer I think has like very unique opportunities to take all these things and like compose them in ways that be very exciting for like everyone like to hear about.
Yeah. I guess kind of closing out, like what are you excited about over the next year?
Uh, that's a good question. What I'm excited, what I want to see is um, a couple of things actually. One is like, okay, that's like a little bit more like business oriented. I think I'd love to see use cases and paths to value to become more clear. Like, okay, what we are experimenting with like so many different things, applying AI on them, but something out there has like to start surfacing as like something that delivers value outside of, okay, like a lot of the stuff that's happening with developer tooling, right? Um, the question is like, okay, if we move outside of that, we start getting in other business processes, like what surfaces there are something reliable enough that we can put into production. I think like what's big part of what is missing is like success stories of putting these things into production.
Right.
For experimentation and like demos and like all that stuff, like there's a lot, but I'd love to hear and see more of like, hey, like that's how we productized it, like how we got it into production. That's one thing. The other thing is like I'm very curious to see how software development processes are going to change, because I think like the traditional approach of we have the customer, we have the product manager, we have the engineer, and what happens is the product manager gets like tries to understand what the customer needs, codifies these into like some kind of requirements that sends to engineering. The engineering builds something, and this something is like sent back to the customer. What AI changes in this kind of like linear process is that the customer, like the stakeholder, actually needs to be part of the development process. And that's because of the prompts, because you need the domain expert to actually develop the prompts. It's really hard to have someone who is not a domain expert figure out like how to fine tune this part of like the stack now. I don't know what the solution is. Like, I don't think anyone has figured this out, but it is like a very common thing that I hear. Like many times, like I see like the AI engineering teams, the problems like many times that they have is that like, okay, like, sure, we'll build the software, we'll put like a placeholder there for like a prompt, but at the end of the day, the behavior, like user experience depends on that. And the problem is that this UX needs to be defined by the domain expert, who is the customer in this case, right? It works better with developer tools because the people who are building them are themselves the customers, right? So yeah, of course, like Cloud Code has amazing harnesses there, and like it's really good at like finding the exact scope of what to do. But that's primarily because like the people who are building it are like amazing engineers themselves, and they know very well like what an engineer looks for, right? But take this and put it like into the medical space. Okay, like how do I know if like the way I'm transcribing this thing is like the right way or not, right? Or this is the right piece of information to extract or not? You need the domain expert there. So that's another very exciting thing, which I think whoever like figures this out, it's going to be like kind of like a gold mine for them. And the other thing is I want to see more. I think inference is becoming more and more important. I think the signal for that is like if we see there's like companies in hardware that they are starting to build like specialized silicon just for inference. And I think when that industry starts innovating, it's a very strong signal of like what is going like to happen, what is important. But we need also to start thinking of inference not just like at the online use case, which is like primarily what is driven by the consumer, let's say, needs out there, which is like primarily chatbots, but also what I call like the batch inference, which is like, okay, now we have a couple thousands of PDFs that were generated in our business like today, and we need to go and process them in a streamlined fashion to extract information that we need. And we need to do that with SLAs. We need to do that, and SLAs both in terms of like delivery time and also like quality and all these things, like the boring data engineering things of the past, let's say. But we don't yet have like the infrastructure to do that. Like an SLA of 24 hours for batch inference, and this 24 hours means it can happen like in the next 5 minutes, can happen like in the next 23 hours and 45 minutes. Like, okay, what's that? I don't know. So these are like the things that I'm looking really into, like I don't want to say anything about like agents and like the latest hype because okay, that's inevitable to happen or transformed into something else.
Those are all awesome. I have to have you back on sometime, man. I think you're a great podcast guest as well as a host, but
Yeah,
you're fascinating to talk to. So
yeah.
yeah, congrats on being your. I don't know if this is your first time as a guest, but yeah, good job. So
It's my second actually. We had
second,
like
okay,
one more like a few weeks ago, but
got it.
I'm still the young in this role, so I have to learn
In
it. I have more.
podcasting, right? How many podcasts did you host? Do you know?
Good question. How many episodes? So I had the data stack, so I think like stated they we had like probably maybe 200, around 200 episodes or something like that. And then I started another one that I'm doing now, which is like more, it's not like as organized. Like I do it like only when I have the opportunity and really want like to, get and record something, which we've done other like 20 probably episodes.
Nice.
Yeah, I've done, podcasting is, um, it's hard. I think like people, don't realize how much work it takes like to put it, even something like mediocre out.
Even something like what?
Mediocre in terms of like the quality.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, I think it's I mean, I guess I don't know about you, but I'm so used to doing podcasts at this point that it's kind of like I
Yeah,
mean, I can literally I've done this before. I've rolled out of bed like in 2 minutes I have to be on a podcast and I just go like
yeah,
fix my
yeah,
stupid hair and put on a t-shirt and then I show up
yeah,
and it's coffee's still like hot and jingling in
yeah,
the
yeah.
mug and but that's good and bad, right? Because I think that at that point you become kind of comfortable with a routine.
Hmm.
But it depends on the guest. If it's a guest I feel really comfortable with, yeah, totally. Like right before we recorded, I actually recorded another podcast and went and made a cup of coffee. And I was like, cool, Kostas, he's a pro at this, right?
Yeah,
I do not need to
yeah,
worry about anything.
yeah.
But yeah, it
Oh,
just depends.
100%. I think like has a lot to do like in this format where you have like a dialogue. I think it has like a lot to do with like the chemistry of like the
Yeah,
people there. Like, and I mean, I had people that I loved. Like, I could probably keep talking for like hours.
hmm
And I had like people that like we ended, and I was like, what did we talk about this whole hour? Like, I was like, wow. Like, I was like completely like we couldn't communicate. Like, and I'm
yeah.
sure if we were like outside the two of us, we still have like the same problem. Like, we wouldn't be able to communicate. It's not like the other person problem. Like, it's a relationship problem. It's like the
That's how it
combination of the
is.
two. So
It is what it is. Sometimes you gel with people really well, and and sometimes it's just like you say, it's just human communication. Sometimes it works,
yeah,
sometimes it does. Sometimes it's just the day of the week and the hour. I don't know. Like sometimes people jive and they don't. Like I was just actually working out with a friend of mine at the gym today, and usually we chat a lot. And today he wasn't chatty at all. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, I'm not even gonna ask. Have a have a good
yeah,
workout. I'll talk to you next time. So it just
100%.
yeah, it just
100%.
happens. And then if you get like corporate comms in the mix with a guest, then it's just all bets are off. So
Yeah,
I try not to deal with that too much. But
yeah. That's I don't know. I think what I was saying to people who were like wanted like to come to the pod was like, don't like do it like for a personal branding and hope that like this is going to reflect back to the corporate branding. But if you do that like in a canned way, trying to think of it as like a lead generation kind of thing, like it's not going to work.
not gonna
Just
work.
because like yeah, like people don't consume this content in the context that this can work. It's like a completely
Right.
different platform.
Nice.
So it always has to be about like the person. It doesn't matter if you're like the CEO of Apple, like you are the person, not the CEO of Apple at that point when you're like
Well, those conversations are almost worse in some ways. If you get the CEO from a big tech company, it's like everything has to be scripted,
Oh
everything
yeah,
has to be this or that, and the conversation is almost useless in a lot of ways, at least in my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
I'm not gonna name names. You get some of the CEOs of even like our big companies in our industry, and the interviews, frankly, aren't that interesting.
yeah. Oh,
Because
100%.
they can't say what they want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you ever had also like to have like a PR person like being on on the time during like the recording?
You've had that happen. And they're just kind of in the background. I'm just like,
Yeah,
get this. But anymore, like like I recently did a podcast with the CEO of Matillion, and his comms team wanted to know what we're talking about, and I just said it's unscripted. We'll talk about what we talk about, and they were cool
yeah,
with it. And it ended up being Matthew Scullion. The interview was great, and he's just like you're the normally my comms team preps me. They said you're not prepping. There's nothing to
yeah.
prep. I think he liked that, and it ended up being a great conversation. But I like those, and I appreciate the comms teams when they do give it the liberty to just
Yeah.
kind of go off onto left field. But that's where the most interesting conversations are. But if it's just otherwise, it's a pitch for the product, it's a pitch for the company. It's just all the
Yeah.
it's just boring as hell. So
100%.
well, anyway, have to have you back on again. Good luck on the company, and congrats. I think you raised money recently too, so it's pretty awesome from what I saw.
Yeah,
So.
we actually raised them around like we closed around like about a year ago, and we're like in
Okay.
stealth building because
Okay.
we pretty much started with absolutely nothing. So we started like literally like building everything like from first principles.
So,
And we 3 weeks ago like came out of stealth
yeah.
and also like open sourced like the Fennec project. Yeah, like it's exciting.
Yes.
It's nice when you go out of stealth and you can, like talk about the things that you're doing. It's almost like a liberating feeling after like 1 year being in stealth.
That's awesome, man. Well, hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you, likewise,
Enjoy.
and
Yeah.
looking forward to come back.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
See ya.